In accordance with the navigational sciences of the United States Navy, and as evidenced by the physical and the historical elements of that era, this is the real-world story of Noah and the maritime empires after the flood. Such places as Stonehenge, Easter Island, Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, and Tiwanaku, to name but a few of the greatest man-made puzzles, seemingly appear to lie in a scattered jumble across the face of the earth. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. For it is a rarely known fact that the people of prehistory were the very first to use spheres to define the physical world on which they lived. To that end, it was necessary to establish a global network of precisely defined geodetic points to which all other points of geodetic interest could be subsequently tied. This concentric series of wooden posts are known as Woodhenge, and they replicate the positions of the original wooden gnomons which once stood here. These posts are located very near to the wind portals of Stonehenge, and to an abundance of earthen mounds which were built one basketful of soil at a time, until the critical horizon could be plainly seen. Woodhenge is situated on an island that is completely surrounded by the open sea. This series of wooden posts are known as Woodhenge. They are situated very near to an earthen mound that was built one basketful of soil at a time, until the critical horizon could be plainly seen. Woodhenge is the site of the first true city to be built in this part of the world. Legend records that the people who took part in constructing this site are said to have been red-haired, fair-skinned, and blue-eyed, and to have spoken in a dialect that had come from across the sea. Woodhenge lies upon the shores of one of the world's greatest rivers, which in turn leads directly to the open sea. The ruins of prehistoric Tiwanaku are located very near to the world's highest and largest lake. The watercraft that are still made here are created from hollow reeds in the exact same way as the ships which plied the ancient waters of Easter Island, the Indus River Valley, Angkor Wat, and Egypt, half a world away. The massive stones used to build Tiwanaku, and the complex manner in which they were so painstakingly fastened and interlocked together, is identical in every way to the manner in which Stonehenge was built. This is among the several reasons why Tiwanaku is still called the rectangular Stonehenge. The ancient artifacts found at Tiwanaku are an exact match to those which are found in abundance at Woodhenge. The ancient variant name for Tiwanaku is Taikapala, the stones that stand in reference to the center. Each of these 3 points lies with exact geodetic precision upon this single line, whose diameter is equal to exactly 1/4 of the world's circumference. In addition, the wooden gnomons placed along its course were purposely erected so as to cast a 45-degree shadow at each respective location and exactly the same moment, and by doing so memorialize their ability to measure the breadth of the Earth's surface by employing their keenly gained knowledge of precise geodetic planning. The central axis of this particular circle of equal altitude was also strategically chosen as it most closely defines both the currents of the wind and the currents of the sea that prevail in this part of the world. This equal altitude circle exemplifies the mix of circular, spherical, and linear relationships, or otherwise the principal parts of a circle, that were used to connect certain star points in the sky to their respective counterpart points on the surface of the earth, and in so doing enabled these ancient seafarers to connect one earthly location to another, regardless of the vast separation of both land and sea that existed between them. Critical circular lines such as these are known to navigators as circles of position. Their centers as geographical positions, and the principal parts of the circle which they produce are known as critical lines of position. For you see, geometry is the world's oldest science. It is an ancient term which literally means to measure the earth. Geometry is both a mathematical science and a graphical tool. Geometry is the cornerstone of astronomy, and in like manner, and for common cause, is also the cornerstone of terrestrial navigation. Only in this way, using these various forms of mathematical tools, could both the earth and the sky be ultimately measured, joined together, and subsequently charted with a great precision by the prehistoric ancestors of the world's first mariners, who, as it is now known based upon scientifically derived dating techniques, began to travel freely about both the oceans and the inland waterways of a pristine world more than 150,000 years ago. The equal altitude circle has been used by navigators since before the dawn of recorded time. The largest equal altitude circle that can be drawn upon the face of the earth or upon a sphere is known as a great circle. By simply maintaining the same angular position from a common center point or a common center star, the destination of a ship at sea or a journeyman would always lie upon the circle, and it would always lie directly straight ahead. However, in order to memorialize these circles of equal altitude, the Earth first had to be precisely mapped. To achieve this goal, certain key points were set out across the face of the Earth to which all other great circles and circles of equal altitude would be subsequently tied. Certain types of these very critically placed points are known to navigators as antipodal points, or points that are completely opposite from one another. The Dogon people who live in the vast region of Tonga have perplexed scholars since their very first day of contact, for you see they were highly skilled in drawing complex diagrams of the sky. But even more importantly, they spoke of such things as the rings of Saturn. Yet the rings of Saturn cannot be seen with the naked eye. Still, this incredible knowledge was shared with yet another ancient tribal culture, an oceanic people who lived on a tiny island that is situated in one of the remotest parts of the world's largest sea. At a position on the Earth's surface that was located one half of the world away at the antipodal point, at a position on the Earth's surface that lay directly opposite from the ancient Dogon culture of Greater Tonga. The Dogon have lived since times of prehistory upon the headwaters of what eventually swells in size to become one of the world's greatest rivers, which in turn leads directly to the open sea. The people on the tiny island of Tonga built this massive monument to memorialize this great circle navigational baseline. And in like manner, and for common cause, so too was the great celestial monument located at Tawanako, built in similar fashion as the monument located on the remote island of Tonga. Each of these 3 points lie upon this great circle navigational baseline, and at the exact same angular distance from the moon's prevailing common center point, which served the practical viewing needs of both mariners and land-based journeymen alike, as they traveled about in both the northern and southern hemispheres in that particular era. Like Tawanako, Machu Picchu lies precisely upon the equal altitude circle, but at the intersection point of yet another great circle that was also configured to represent the maximum standstill positions of the moon, but due to the precession of the equinoxes, was defined in a different era. This particular intersection can also be viewed as a clear example of how mariners, navigators, and cartographers alike utilize just 2 fixed points on the celestial sphere to precisely define any point on the Earth's rotating surface at a very particular selected moment in time. The region of sky upon which the precise point where the center of this particular great circle is located was known as the Phoenix, which is how the Phoenicians, the most renowned mariners of the ancient world, got their name. Machu Picchu also lies precisely at a position on the Earth's surface that is exactly one half of the world away at the antipodal point from the great inland harbors of Angkor Wat. Machu Picchu, a navel of the world, is situated high above the edge of the world's largest ocean. But it also lies at the point of origin of what eventually swells in size to become one of the world's mightiest rivers. One that traverses across an entire continent and serves as an uninterrupted link to yet another of the world's greatest seas. The people who built Angkor Wat and the outlying earthen mound that is situated at the antipodal point directly across from the observational platform of Machu Picchu left behind these magnificent structures, all of which are built upon the shores of what is considered to be one of the greatest inland harbors of the ancient world. A vast complex of canals and waterways that are connected by a river, which in turn leads directly to the open sea. The original name of Easter Island was Tapito Te Henua, the navel of the deep. The ancient and still undeciphered script which is found here is an exact match to that which is also found in the ancient Indus Valley, at the antipodal point, a geodetic position on the Great Circle that is exactly one half of the world away. This navel of the deep, or central point, is considered to be the most mysterious island on earth, because the ancient mariners who had navigated here and left behind these colossal statues of stone had purposely situated themselves in one of the remotest parts of the world's largest sea. Each of these 4 points lies upon this single line. It is a very special line that is both a great circle and a circle of equal altitude. However, it is not the only great circle baseline, nor is it the only circle of equal altitude. It is, however, the primary navigational baseline, to which all other circles are positioned, and by association, all other points of geodetic importance were tied. For this is no ordinary baseline, for it naturally evolved because it lay directly below the path of the moon, as defined by its greatest points of declination, below which some of the Earth's greatest sea currents flowed. The limits of the moon's most extreme celestial path is the founding basis, and the reason for the development of the zodiac. For the moon is Earth's only satellite of navigational importance, serving not only as a critical timepiece, as it moves with a deliberate pulse among the stars, but the moon also regulates the tides of the seas and defines the turning points of the winds, which in turn then regulates the currents of the sea. And so as the positions of the moon and the stars were strategically and systematically charted upon the fixed celestial sphere, utilizing an array and a combination of various forms of intersecting circular grids, so too were these same celestial counterparts projected onto and tied to the terrestrial sphere in the exact same way. Only with deliberate structure, and with precise geodetic planning, using this particular great circle as the primary navigational baseline, was a worldwide map subsequently portrayed. In addition, these same great circles also served the practical needs of the crew who systematically replenished their craft at these established harbor points as they made their way across the seas in their ever-expanding circles to collect, as well as to dispense, the critical findings of their journeys. The evidence of these travels in the many circles of equal altitude that was subsequently developed and tied to it by these very same people who both founded and perfected the science of astronomy and celestial navigation is as indisputable and precise as the navigational means, the navigational methods, and the physical and human evidence which support it. But even more remarkable than this is the ultimate realization that the placement of such a network of central points, or so-called navels, could only have been achieved after many thousands of years of observations had been collected, processed, and then ultimately shared on a worldwide basis. Thus is how both the earth and the sky were joined together by this mysterious worldwide community, who not only founded and perfected the sciences of astronomy and celestial navigation, but who also moved freely about the earth to establish their indelible and undeniable monuments along the shores of inland and ocean waterways, so that it would one day lead to this ultimate understanding. This is the greatest testimony of their achievements. This one particular circle of equal altitude is known as a great circle. It is by definition, as well as by inspection, the most monumental sea route in the world. And perhaps it is just a single line, but in truth, it is still merely the beginning of what will one day be the greatest story that will ever be told. In 1932, soon after the discovery of this map, the United States government launched an intensive investigation in an all-out effort to determine if a map of this precision could possibly have been drawn by the people of prehistory. This particular map, which fell into the possession of Admiral Perry Reyes, a man who had spent his entire life sailing the inland and ocean waterways of Egypt 500 years ago, contained several notes made by his hand that he had written along the edge of this map. Among the things he wrote is the credit given to the cartographers of Alexander the Great, who history records as having entered into Egypt more than 2,300 years ago, with one of the largest scientific expeditions ever assembled, and for one single purpose: to retrieve and preserve in the massive library any map or sphere that had been made long before even their own time by the legendary seafarers of Egypt. Cartographic treasures purportedly made by a worldwide seafaring community that was ancient even to him. However, it was not just this single note which had captured the world's attention, or because this particular map clearly showed the coastlines to either side of the Atlantic Ocean. But even more importantly, it was because of the information contained in yet another marginal note written by Admiral Perry Reyes, who had simply stated that one of his contemporaries, an incorrigible man, had just recently used a copy of this very same map to find his way across the open sea, and who had indeed made landfall on an opposite shore. Admiral Perry Reyes identified this man as Christopher Columbus. When Christopher Columbus sailed into the harbors of the so-called New World for the very first time, he was not surprised when his ships were intercepted at sea by a single sleek and fast-moving vessel that held more than 100 people, even though each one of his own ships, which had just crossed the ocean, only held slightly more than 30 men each. Yet every attempt made at that time to identify either the geometrical means or the navigational methods by which a map of this precision could possibly have been made by the people of prehistory had failed. Yet mystery exists merely from a lack of understanding. For you see, it was not yet known that the positions of the moon and the stars had been strategically and systematically charted upon the fixed celestial sphere, utilizing an array and a combination of various forms of intersecting circular grids, and that these same celestial counterparts were ultimately projected onto and tied to the terrestrial sphere in the exact same way. This is how both the earth and the sky were joined together by this mysterious worldwide community, who not only founded and perfected the science of astronomy and celestial navigation, but who also moved freely about the earth to establish their indelible and undeniable monuments along the shores of inland and ocean waterways, so that it would one day lead to this ultimate understanding. This is the greatest testimony of their achievements. "2,300 years ago, Alexander the Great set out in ships with a select group of men and headed directly for the Indus River Valley. And he did so because he shared in the same passionate academic pursuits as his mentors, Plato and Aristotle, each of whom had not only become obsessed with the legends, the teachings, and the doctrines of Moses, but who were also collectively captivated by the ever-fading stories of how and why the massive monuments that existed all along the so-called Nile River had come to be built, when, and by whom. In his academic pursuits to search out and to preserve this ever-fading history and to retrieve the legendary cartographic treasures purported to have been compiled by this particular maritime culture, so they could be ultimately deposited in the newly constructed library for the sake of posterity, Alexander set his course, and with the grateful blessings of his mentors, he headed directly for the Indus River Valley. While en route to this destination, it is a matter of record, as related by those who accompanied him on that voyage, that as Alexander was approaching the mouth of the Indus River, he first stopped at an island, where he personally viewed the remains of Noah's Ark. Today, just east of the rugged mountains, and situated in the plain located to the nearby provinces of Shinar, lie these ruined cities, where this ancient and highly skilled maritime culture virtually sprang up overnight, since there is no evidence that they migrated here over land, and who then just as quickly as they had arrived, so too did they just as suddenly vanish. However, before their abrupt departure, they left in their wake these now ruined structures made of fire-hardened brick that were uniquely joined together not with mortar, but with bitumen, a most important commodity of the ancient mariners. These fire-hardened bricks, joined together with bitumen, was the manner in which they built their cities, and this towering monument, which they intentionally left behind as a legacy of their greater plan, just before they separated, and then seemingly vanished without a trace. Noah took his sons, and they went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. At the end of 150 days, the ark finally came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. From here they went eastward, and they entered into the plain of Shinar, where they made hardened bricks, and then joined them together with bitumen. This was the manner in which they built their cities, and the monument, which was raised up in tribute to the heavens, declaring it to be the mark of their new beginning as they made their preparations to scatter across the face of the whole earth. For the earth had now become keenly divided in the lifetime of Eber. And so they set out, and they separated from one another, and they went abroad, and from them the coastland people began to spread, until the new maritime nations had made their way across the face of the whole earth in those times following the flood. This one particular circle of equal altitude is known as a great circle. It is by definition, as well as by inspection, the most monumental and the most prodigious sea route in the world. And perhaps it is just a single line. But in truth, it is still merely the beginning of what will one day be the greatest story that will ever be told.